Boise is not for everyone. So we are going to talk about all of the reasons not to move to Boise and avoid the horrible experience it could cause if you get here and hate it, then have to pack up and move all over again just a few months later. Now, people here are just a little more relaxed, not like the bigger cities. As you will see in a little bit detail later, the downtown is small and there isn't a ton of nightlife when you compare it to places like Seattle or LA or even Denver. A lot of Boise is suburbs. It's more family friendly, especially in Meridian, Star, Kuna, and Eagle. Just a lot more quiet. There's a lot less to do than a lot of the other metro cities.
These are just ordinary, boring people.
The other thing is the Greenbelt walking in Boise. That's more of a good time in Boise, is just walking along the Greenbelt, kind of hanging out on the river. And then there's also not as much big business here. So it's just more quiet and slow paced in Boise than some of these other metro areas. Number two is Republicans. So some people in northern Idaho may argue that Boise isn't Republican and it's kind of got washed out.
We should get more of them to be Republicans.
But Idaho as a whole is Republican, and that can be a big con of moving here. And don't be surprised if you see Trump flags on the back of trucks, or you see Trump stickers, or you see Trump signs in the people's front yards. That is a common occurrence here. And then abortion is not okay in Idaho, which goes along with those politics. It's not okay for abortion in the state of Idaho. But on the other side of this, Boise is shifting a little bit. So some kudos to the people in North Idaho. As it has grown, it has come a little bit more liberal, especially with BSU and a lot of people moving here from more liberal parts of the country. Boise has a Democratic mayor, and it has shifted to that more liberal side in the city of Boise itself, not in the entire valley, but the city of Boise. So there has been a little bit of shift, but for the most part, it is more conservative. But Star, Middleton, Kuna, and Nampa, those are going to be more conservative, on the more conservative side. Those are the smaller cities and suburbs of the Treasure Valley, and you have that more small town community feel. They have more of those conservative values. When you go there, they're going to back the blue, you're going to have American flags. It is going to be even more conservative, which is more true to what the state of Idaho is as a whole. The other thing is the school system here. It does have some of the lowest budget, so the lowest funding for teachers and the school districts in the entire nation. It's actually one of the, I think the 50th state, so the lowest funded state, which is why part of the reason that Idaho is ranked lower in states when it comes to education is part of that funding. So Idaho is ranked lower when it comes to education than the rest of the nation.
So, not very smart, right?
One plus is we do not have a homeless population in Boise, and part of that can be due to the politics and just Boise as a whole. There's a smaller shelter near downtown, but it's very minimal. I've gone down there a number of times. My mom's worked in that industry in Boise, and it is rare that you see homeless people in Boise unless you're right around the homeless shelter. The other thing that comes with politics is guns. And some people you will see are going to be open carry, which it can get scary for some people if you're not used to that. That's one thing you hear, is it's not so much that people have them, it's just that it's kind of a shock when you come to Boise, you go to the village or you go downtown and you see somebody carrying a pistol on the side of their hip. It can be a little bit shocking and it can scare some people away. You can own guns in Idaho. It's not a problem here. People love their guns and they want to have them in the state of Idaho and in the Boise area. You're allowed to protect yourself. If somebody comes into your home, if somebody's assaulting you or committing a felony on you, you have the right to protect yourself. And if you want to go into more detail on some of those gun laws and you want to learn a little bit more, and not just this basic overview of the gun laws, I do have a video on all of the gun laws in Idaho. The other thing with guns is that there's shooting ranges just in town. So you have indoor shooting ranges. Me and my fiance at an apartment we live in, we have one right next door to us. So you have shooting ranges and the opportunity to get out and shoot guns. You can shoot your AR-15s, there's automatic rifles. You have outdoor ones just outside of town. And then the other side of this is if you live in parts of Nampa or kind of on the outskirts of Boise or Meridian, and then especially Star or Middleton, you'll hear shotgun shots in the morning.
Now, No, we're going duck hunting.
Just the other month, it's waterfowl season here, so I woke up to shotgun shells shooting just outside of our neighborhood, because if you're just outside of city limits, you can still hunt in the valley itself. So you may hear that and it may freak you out a little bit, but that's perfectly normal in the valley. Now, on the other side of this, Boise is extremely safe. And when you compare Boise to the rest of the metro cities in the entire nation, it's one of the safest metro areas in the entire country. So there's guns here, you can protect yourself, and some of those occurrences of home invasions or murders or shootings you don't hear about as much. Now, you have heard about it a little bit more as of recently as it's grown, but it's still nothing compared to the rest of the country. The other thing is the things to do in Boise. So as I mentioned, the size of the downtown is small and there's just not very much nightlife in Boise. We have a few clubs and bars on one street, but not very many. So if nightlife is something you like to do, you like to have a lot of clubs, or you like to have a lot of things to do at night, events, comedy shows, concerts, you're just not going to have as much in Boise as you would in like Austin, Texas, or even Denver or Seattle, some of those things. And I know it is a thing that is complained about a lot, and some people move away from Boise for that reason. So even if that is the case and that's something that you really want, and maybe Austin is better for you, or Tennessee, Nashville, still reach out to me, shoot me a text. I'd be happy to help you move to some of those areas as well, because Boise may just not be for you. But in the other parts of the valley, there is still some fun stuff to do. So if it isn't a big requirement, you still do have some options in Boise. You have the Idaho Center in Nampa, there's sports in Boise, you have the Boise Center, you have BSU Stadium, we have a minor league hockey team. We don't have some of the big things like a professional major league basketball, football, or hockey team, but we do have some of those things to do. So the Idaho Center and the stadium downtown, we have comedians, we have big concerts come through. Another popular thing in Boise, and a lot of the things that we do have, are going to be Art in the Park, which is in the summer, where it's a huge event downtown at one of the parks that has a lot of art, a lot of vendors, and some events that come around.
This is a cool painting I made.
We also have, of course, movie theaters. We have Top Golf, there's axe throwing, BSU has a lot of events. There's the Steelhead Games, the minor league hockey team that I told you about. So there's still some things to do, and especially when you talk about the outdoor activities that Boise offers, those are more of the pros, and some of the benefits of Boise is we have all of the outdoors that Idaho has to offer. But when it comes to everything that other metro cities have, it's just not going to be as much, so it can definitely be a reason not to move here. The next thing is housing prices. So they used to be more affordable in Boise. You used to be able to come here and get a house for $200,000-$300,000, or a home on acreage for $400,000-$500,000. But that isn't the case anymore, not just because of the low inventory, but everybody moving here over the last 10 years, it has grown a lot, and the demand for housing combined with the low inventory has just caused home prices to go up a lot, 10, 15, 20, 30% from what they used to be. Kuna, Star, and Eagle have seen some of the highest jumps. So Kuna used to be one of the more affordable parts of the valley, but now it's up there with Meridian, and you're paying that same price. And I don't see them coming down anytime soon. I see them just continuing to go up. Over the last year, when interest rates came up, they came down a little bit. But as the interest rates come down again, and as people continue to move here, they're going to go up and up and up, and it's just going to continue. I think soon in the next 10, 20 years, I wouldn't be surprised if it is like another San Diego or Seattle, where the home prices, you're buying a regular home for $500,000.
Yeah, well, let's hope not.
And as we'll see later on with the cost of living, the income here just hasn't kept up with that home price. So it is kind of the perfect storm for home prices to come up, the income of people not to come up as much. And so when you get here, if you get a job in Boise, you are going to take a pay cut, and you're not going to be able to afford that increase in the home prices. Now, some of the most affordable places in Boise is going to be your Nampa and Caldwell area. That's where a lot of the homes that do have a little bit more affordability are. You can be paying, $50,000 to $100,000 less for the same size home than you may in Meridian or Eagle. But the typical home price in Boise is going to be $400,000 to $500,000. That's going to be pretty much the average for most people moving here. And if you aren't buying here and you're renting here, the average rent is going to be about $1,500. for a typical monthly rent. But if you need a single family home or you want 3-4 bedrooms with your own backyard, it's pretty much going to be $2,000 plus. Most people in single family homes here are paying $2,000 to $2,500 for their home. So not only are the home prices, but the rent is going to be a little bit higher in Boise, especially than it used to be. The other thing is, not only are you paying more for your home, but with the housing and a lot of these tract production builders, you're going to be a lot smaller lots. So as you've seen in some other states like California, you may be used to this, where you have really tiny houses all crammed together with really small backyards. A lot of the neighborhoods here have kind of gone smaller and smaller. You don't have as much room to breathe. But I'd say on average, it is still at the point where it's still larger than a lot of states. So it's not as crammed as some states, but it's definitely more crammed than it used to be. Number 6 of not to move here is going to be the weather. So Boise is cold and it's hot. So in the winter, you have really cold temperatures depending on where you're coming from. If you're comparing to like Maine or Wisconsin, it's not going to be as bad. But if you're coming from California, Washington, Oregon, it's going to be a lot colder. You're going to have the average temperature here is going to be 30 to 35 degrees in the winter. And there's days where in the mornings it's 10 degrees or even a little bit colder. So
I did not sign up for cold weather.
That can be a big reason people move. And then the snow with that winter and that cold temperatures, it's not as bad as those other places that I mentioned in the Midwest. But if you're not used to that, the snow can be a big con of moving here, whether it's getting used to driving in the snow or it's shoveling your driveway. Some of the hassles that come with that, wearing coats and dealing with the cold and snow. Inversions also come in the winter. So inversions is when the clouds and the atmosphere kind of get caught up against the mountains, and Boise being a valley, it just gets dark and cloudy for days or weeks at a time, and it can get kind of depressing. You don't see the sun. If you're coming from Seattle where it rains a lot, you may be used to that. But when you combine the cold, the snow, and not seeing the sun for weeks at a time, and the days being shorter, it can get long when the winters come and you're not used to it. The other side of this is obviously the heat in the summers. Boise is in a desert, so it is classified as a desert, and it is dry here, but you do get the heat. So in the summers, in July and August, we'll get days or sometimes even weeks of 95 to 105 degree weather.
The weather like out there, it's hot, damn hot, real hot.
It can get as hot as 115 here. And you combine that with the wildfires in the summer, so you get smoke and bad air quality, and then you combine it with the dryness. It can be a reason that people leave Boise. Is not only do they have to deal with the snow and the cold in the winter, but they have to deal with the heat and the dryness and the fires in the summer. Number 7 of why not to move to Boise is going to be, we have a smaller airport. Direct flights have been a problem for some people. If you like to take a flight to visit family in certain parts of the country, you're not going to have as many options. Now, it has grown a lot, and I know that there is plans to expand Boise's airport, especially with how much it's grown. But currently, right now, some of the direct flights that Boise Airport offers is Dallas, Austin, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, Salt Lake, Denver, Minneapolis, Vegas, Phoenix, and there's a handful of other smaller direct flights, but those are going to be your only options for direct flights. And so if you have people in other parts of the country and you're used to living in LA or Seattle or Denver, where you have more options for direct flights, the smaller airport can be a problem, especially if you have to travel for work. Now, number 8 is Californians. So people have felt unwelcome here coming from California. You might see stickers that keep California at Idaho, or stickers of that thing where they don't want Californians here. And some people have vandalized people that move from California, and there's some people who just do not want people moving here. They want Idaho to stay small. They want Idaho to stay conservative. And that might be one of the biggest complaints, is that I hear people, they don't want people moving from other states and bringing their politics with them. And so there can be some people in the valley that are not very welcoming. But for the most part, people are welcoming in Boise. People want people to move here. They're going to be polite as long as you're welcoming as well, you're kind, and you treat people well. but most people are quick to change their license plate. So if you're moving from California or Washington or Oregon,
Get rid of it.
you may want to change your license plate pretty quick to avoid some of those bad apples in Boise. And a popular phrase for people to use when they move here is they say that they're a political refugee, and usually people understand that reason a lot more than some other reasons. Now, number 9 is the population of Boise. So the growth has caused a lot of traffic problems within the valley. You have a lot of construction, and the infrastructure just hasn't been able to keep up with the growth of the valley. Whenever you're driving around, you're going to have it's going to be more crammed. It's going to take longer than it should to get to places. And then them trying to catch up with the infrastructure, you have a lot of construction. So you're going to get detours and roads closed, and it can cause a lot of hassles. And that's a big con of moving to Boise. Places like Star and Kuna used to be super quiet, and now you get that traffic and you get lines at the grocery stores. And so you may move to Boise and you may pick Star or Middleton or Kuna and think that you're going to get a small town feel, but then you get there and you live there and you realize, like, holy cow, there's lines at the grocery store, there's traffic, there's a lot more people than I thought there would be. So it has caused problems with the growth in population, and what that also comes with is that there's overcrowding in a lot of the schools. So the amount of students per teacher is really high. So you'll have 20 to even 30 students per teacher, especially in Meridian. And that can be a problem for your kids if you have them in the school system and they're not getting the attention they need. And there's a lot of students for every teacher. So number 10 on the list, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is just the cost of living. So the median income right now in Boise is only $55,000, which is low when you compare it to the cost of housing and when you compare it to other parts of the country, other places like San Francisco or Seattle or Denver or Tennessee. So the income hasn't caught up to the cost of housing. And there's also not a ton of major business here. You don't have a bunch of major companies like you do in some of the other metro areas. You have Micron, which is a really big tech company here. And then you have a lot of the hospitals. Those are going to be your major jobs in the area. There has been a tech boom that is kind of happening. So as Boise has grown, a lot of companies have moved here because Idaho is a more business friendly state. And there's a lot of things changing to where there is going to be more major businesses. Facebook or Meta is building a place out in Kuna. You also have Amazon, who just built a warehouse here. So it is growing, and as it continues to grow, there's going to be more and more options. One pro is that there is lower utility and taxes here. Idaho does have a state tax, but it is lower than a lot of the other states, so it's not as bad. And the tax burden in Idaho is, I think, ranked 31st or 32nd in the country. So you don't have that huge tax burden, and utility costs for your home, so electricity or gas, is going to be one of the lowest in the country. The other thing is gas prices are a little higher in Idaho, but if you compare that to California or some of the other states, it's not going to be nearly as high. But when you compare it to places like Salt Lake City or Texas, your gas prices for your car are going to be a little bit higher here. Number 11 on the list is farms and the small town feel. So there is farms and farmland. You'll see crops, you'll see cornfields, you'll see wheat fields. There's some right next to Village, which is one of the most popular places in Meridian. You're going to have it right next to a lot of neighborhoods in Meridian. And then, of course, Star, Middleton, Nampa, and Kuna, that's going to be really common. You're going to have cows and horses and fields all over. And then in Nampa, you have places like the sugar beet factory, which gives off a really bad smell in Nampa, and they've actually had to change some regulations with it. But in the afternoons or at night, you can get a really bad smell that blows through Nampa because of the sugar beet factory. And then even some of the cows and some of the dairy farms around the valley can cause some of those problems too. You're going to see tractors on roads in some of the main areas and some of the subdivisions. And so getting used to that can just be a problem for some people, and they may move here and they may think living in Meridian, you're not going to have that small town feel, but it does happen, and just be aware of that. It is a reason that some people don't want to move here. Now, some of the positives of Boise. So everything I just talked about, of course, you can turn every negative into a positive, and some of those things can be something that you're looking for. And if you like that smaller town feel, you like the safety, you like the family-friendly feel, those are all going to be big positives. The other thing that I talked about a little bit earlier is just the outdoor activities that Boise has to offer. So we may not have as much nightlife, But you do have Lucky Peak, so you have boating right outside of town, the Boise River. You can float the Boise River just outside of downtown. You have biking and hiking trails. There's a ton of trails, and mountain biking is a really popular thing to do here. If you like to hunt and you like to fish, you can fish the Boise right in town. I've fished my whole life. It's been a big passion of mine, and hunting as well. There's a lot of options not too far outside of town. In the neighborhoods, you also have ponds that you can fish. And then also just the Greenbelt and the hiking, you have places like Eagle Island and the foothills and places to shoot your gun. And so the outdoor activities in Boise is just going to be a big pro. The other thing is some of the politics, even though that can be a con for some people, it can be a big pro. Is like I mentioned, a political refugee. There's a big reason that people move here. But if you want to know more about all of the suburbs of Boise and a little bit more in depth into each specific one and not make the mistake of choosing the wrong suburb for you, click the video here and you won't want to miss this. It will go into overview of all of the suburbs. So if you know the reasons why not to, you may want to find out some of the reasons too and kind of narrow down which suburb you want to pick if you decide Boise is right for you.